Madeleine McCann vanished on a quiet summer night. No screams, no chase, not a single drop of blood on the floor. The 3-year-old girl seemed to evaporate from the real world, gone from a holiday apartment in the Algarve while her parents were having dinner just a few dozen steps away. And from that moment, a shockwave named Madeleine spread across the United Kingdom, spilled into Europe, and exploded onto the global stage. Police from 3 countries, Portugal, the UK, and Germany, took turns leading the case. Dozens of suspects were questioned, hundreds of witness statements were logged, satellite maps reviewed, phone records cross-checked, travel data scrutinized. Everything was laid bare. Yet after 18 years, all efforts led to the most terrifying conclusion in criminal investigation. No one knows what truly happened. No body, no weapon, no DNA, no confession. The case gradually became a symbol of failure, of forensics, of justice, and of the media. Until one morning in June 2025, when the cracked earth of Praia da Luz gave way again. German investigators, who had pursued suspect Christian Bruckner for years, abruptly cordoned off a patch of wasteland just a few kilometers from where Madeleine disappeared. They dug. And this time, what surfaced was no longer speculation, but physical evidence. A rusted firearm was retrieved from the bottom of a well. Another gun was found buried deeper beneath hardened clay, alongside a faded piece of cloth, appearing to be part of a child's garment. Some bone fragments were also found, later confirmed to be animal remains. No DNA, no body. But the combination of these items was no longer coincidental. It bore signs of concealment. It suggested intentional action. And most of all, it dragged the entire case back from where it had long been buried, beneath the earth, with a truth that had been hidden for 18 years. From that point on, 7 new theories emerged, not only to identify who took Madeleine from this world, but to confront a harsher, more haunting question. Why, after all this time, all this money and all this technology, has no one, not a single person's, been held accountable? Through years of dead-end investigations, the name Christian Bruckner gradually emerged like a familiar shadow, silent, immovable, never confessing, but never quite cleared. A German drifter who once lived near the Algarve, Bruckner came with a criminal history that spoke volumes. Child molestation, possession of child pornography, rape, theft, and addiction. Yet in Madeleine's case, for over 13 years since his name first surfaced, police could not produce a single piece of physical evidence linking him to her disappearance. Until June 2025. The rusted gun pulled from the bottom of a well, just a few kilometers from where Bruckner once lived, was no ordinary discarded item. It was a weapon hidden with intent, concealed in such a way that only someone who knew the terrain, the timing, and the risks could have buried it. Alongside it, a second gun and a faded piece of cloth, possibly from a child's clothing, buried in compacted clay. This location was no longer random. It had become a potential crime scene, and every stone and grain of soil now held the weight of a truth long buried. Bruckner has remained silent. No denials, no confessions. He knows the law, and German law is crystal clear. To convict someone, you need concrete legal evidence, not a criminal record, not suspicion, not instinct. But is his silence the armor of a guilty man, or the last defense of someone wrongly accused? That question remains unanswered. What cannot be denied is this: the newly uncovered items are the closest the investigation has come in 18 years to turning suspicion into prosecution. If any trace of DNA, a strand of hair, or biological residue found on the guns or cloth matches Madeleine, This could become the fatal blow in the legal race before Bruckner's expected release in September 2025. Time is running out, and Bruckner, guilty or not, now sits squarely in the crosshairs of a case the world is exhausted from waiting to close. If what was uncovered during the June 2025 dig truly matters, if the gun at the bottom of the well was no coincidence, if the piece of faded children's clothing wasn't just discarded trash, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. How could someone like Bruckner have done all of this alone? A man living out of a decrepit van, no stable job, no family, no close social ties. His criminal record reads like a litany of personal deviance: petty thefts, sexual offenses, possession of child pornography. But nothing in his past suggests the ability to orchestrate a clean, concealed crime and keep it hidden for nearly 2 decades. So what if Bruckner didn't act alone? The second theory stems directly from the newly revealed scene. The gun wasn't hastily tossed into a bush or left under a car seat. It was buried deep inside a well, in a remote area off the main road, beyond camera range, long abandoned by foot traffic. This was a dump site, and a professional one. To hide a weapon in such a place requires at least 2 things: time and terrain knowledge. Time to plan, to act. Terrain familiarity, to know which wells were sealed, which areas were unpatrolled, which depths could hide something for years without drawing notice. Yes, Bruckner once lived near the area, but is that enough? Past records show Bruckner was easily manipulated. He'd served in minor criminal groups, worked with small-time smugglers, rented properties through intermediaries whose identities were never fully traced. He wasn't a planner, he was an executor. And if the gun was a murder weapon, the real question is who helped him cover it up? Who ordered the disposal or taught him how to do it? To this day, authorities have not summoned or questioned any other individual in connection with the dig site. No former cellmates, no accomplices, no one beyond Bruckner. But that doesn't mean he's the only one who knows about the well. A darker theory, one that has emerged in independent analyses, suggests Bruckner may not have been the first person to touch Madeleine. He may have received her from someone else. He may have been hired to handle the final phase. And the gun? It may not have been his. It may be someone else's mistake, handed to him, or perhaps taken by him. If so, then the gun is not just a clue. It is a key to something far more structured, more organized, more dangerous, where Bruckner is just the gatekeeper, not the one pulling the strings. The question is no longer, did Bruckner do it? It has become, who was behind Bruckner? And why, after 18 years, has no one dared to pursue them? A deep well, 2 firearms, a faded piece of cloth possibly once part of a child's clothing, but no blood, no DNA, not a single trace, not even the faintest, to confirm that Madeleine McCann was ever at this location. And if that's true, then everything we're looking at, the weapons, the cloth, the excavation site, may simply be echoes of a different crime, a different past, or worse, the remains of an entirely misdirected investigation. This is one of the most chilling possibilities raised by forensic experts and seasoned investigators alike. Madeleine may never have been killed in the Algarve. She may never have been buried nearby. She may have been taken, and very possibly still alive at the moment we stopped looking in the right place. Since the night of May 3rd, 2007, every search has revolved around Praia da Luz and its surrounding areas. Why? Because that's where the holiday apartment was. Because her parents were there. Because a few witnesses claim to have seen a man carrying a child across a nearby street. But every one of those leads, in truth, was circumstantial. No camera ever captured Madeleine leaving the apartment. No witness could say, definitively, I saw her. There was no phone signal, no traffic data, No strand of hair or clothing fiber outside the room to confirm she'd ever left it by foot. And if Madeleine was taken within the 30 minutes after her parents left the room, then she could have been placed in a car and out of Algarve before sunrise. Border controls in Portugal at the time were ineffective. The Spanish border was open. No international alert was issued within the first 24 hours. In that window, a child could be moved hundreds of kilometers, or even out of Europe, in complete silence. So when police recently uncovered a firearm and faded cloth near where Bruckner once lived, but no DNA from Madeleine, a reverse theory immediately emerged. What if investigators are digging in the wrong place? What if they're following the trace of a different crime, or worse, a carefully staged illusion that has nothing to do with her? And if that's the case, then it speaks to the most painful truth of all. We may have spent too much time in the Algarve. We may have stared too hard at one suspect and failed to realize that Madeleine might have been taken away, long ago, far away, and in devastating silence. If Madeleine was never present at the recently excavated site, as much of the evidence now seems to suggest, then another possibility comes into sharp focus. Perhaps that place was never the real crime scene. Perhaps it was something else entirely, something constructed. A deep well, rusted firearms, a decaying piece of cloth, no DNA, no blood, no biological trace that ties anything to Madeleine. A suspicious cluster, but not a conclusive one. And if Madeleine was never there, then these objects don't speak to her fate. But they may say a great deal about the intentions of whoever left them behind. And that's where the fourth theory takes root. Someone staged a scene, not to fool the victim, but to fool the investigators. The excavation took place during a crucial moment, just months before Christian Bruckner is due for release in September 2025, unless new charges can be filed. After years of stalled investigations, the sudden appearance of new evidence, the guns, the well, the child's cloth, felt like a breakthrough. But for that very reason, the timing made it deeply suspicious. If it was random, why had it stayed hidden for 18 years? If it belonged to the real perpetrator, why was there not a single trace linking it directly to Madeleine in a case that spent nearly 2 decades hoping for even a sliver of physical evidence? And if it wasn't random and it wasn't real, then what was it? A trap, a setup, a carefully crafted misdirection. Staged crime scenes are not rare in long-running investigations. In high-profile cases, especially those lacking a body, perpetrators often leave misleading evidence to throw police off. Sometimes it's an old toy, sometimes fake blood, sometimes a murder weapon, not connected to the crime, but placed just so. Right time, right place, just convincing enough to make the desperate bite. In the Algarve, all the ingredients for such a setup exist. An unguarded, isolated terrain, away from cameras or curious neighbors. Bruckner's prior presence in the area, creating an easy suspect link. A location unwatched for 18 years, giving anyone the chance to plant evidence at any point in time. If the guns and the cloth were placed there recently, even just a few months or years ago, then any effort to prosecute Bruckner now carries enormous legal risk. Because when no one can prove when or how the items were left, they become vulnerable to the theory of fabrication. It must also be said, Bruckner is not the only person who would benefit from sealing this case. If someone else was involved, someone who actually committed the crime or helped carry it out, then framing Bruckner before his release might be the most effective way to erase loose ends. A wrongful conviction is still a conviction. Once the courts deliver a verdict, the public turns the page. The media stops asking questions, and the real perpetrator, if still alive, fades back into silence. So this scene, the gun in the well, the faded child's cloth, the so-called new clues, may not bring us closer to the truth. It may have been built precisely to make sure we stop looking for it. And the most terrifying part is this: it might already be working. Not every crime leaves blood behind. Not every disappearance ends in a forest, a river, or the bottom of a well. And not every perpetrator is a lone figure acting in panic. After the well was excavated, the one believed to hold critical evidence, one realization stood taller than any item recovered. What makes the Madeleine McCann case so haunting isn't what has been discovered, but what has completely disappeared. And if that disappearance was deliberate, then the theory of a spontaneous abduction followed by local concealment begins to unravel. Another possibility takes its place. Broader, colder, and far more calculated. Madeleine wasn't killed, she was taken, and she wasn't the first. In 2007, the Algarve, the coastal holiday region where the McCanns were staying, wasn't just a postcard destination. According to Europol, it was also a shadowed transit hub, known for money laundering, illicit shipments, and, crucially, the undocumented movement of people across the Portugal-Spain border. Several witnesses reported suspicious men observing children in the resort area days before the disappearance. A white van leaving the street at midnight, a blonde child being escorted through a gas station 40 kilometers away. Each claim like a needle in the sand, unverifiable, yet stubbornly difficult to dismiss. Years later, the flickers continued. A young girl spotted in Morocco, then vanished. A trafficking victim claiming to have once shared a room with a British child kept secret in a suburban house outside Toulouse. A blurry photograph, an anonymous tip, a broken memory. None of it was solid enough to reopen a case, but all of it together chipped away at the official narrative. The trafficking theory addresses what others cannot. Why, after 18 years, not a single forensic trace has ever been found? Not because a murderer was so precise, but because Madeleine wasn't discarded. She was taken, hidden, renamed, and absorbed into an invisible system. Not all criminals kill to escape justice. Some keep their victims alive, but erase who they were. In that world, Madeleine stops being a child. She becomes a commodity, something to be sold, traded, or used as leverage. And if the Madeleine McCann case truly ties into an international trafficking network, then that well the police uncovered didn't bury the truth. It buried our hope that the truth was ever nearby. In any disappearance, the first 48 hours are the most critical, the thin line between resolution and oblivion. It's the window where footprints are still fresh, CCTV footage hasn't yet overwritten, and witness memories remain intact. But in the case of Madeleine McCann, that window wasn't used. It was wasted. The failure didn't stem from one person. It was the result of a chain of small, seemingly rational decisions. Decisions that, when stacked together, knocked the entire investigation off course from the very beginning. When Kate McCann discovered her daughter was missing around 10 p.m. on May 3, 2007, and called the police, the first response was not to seal off the apartment, but to let friends from the holiday group search neighboring rooms themselves. In those crucial minutes, strangers moved in and out of apartment 5A. Curtains were drawn, beds were touched. Any physical trace, if it existed, was disturbed. When Portuguese police arrived, they didn't immediately secure the entire resort. No one blocked exits. No cars were stopped. Dozens of tourists, any of whom might have witnessed something crucial, left the Algarve the next morning without ever being interviewed. In the first 24 hours, local officers still believed Madeleine may have wandered off, and so they didn't issue an international child abduction alert. Her name didn't appear on Interpol notices for several more days. Worse still, within the first week, the press descended on the case with overwhelming force, and rather than helping, they damaged it. Witnesses began changing their accounts after reading the news. Rumors spread across international media, muddling timelines and contaminating details. Most damaging of all, the police began to suspect Madeleine's parents, which diverted the focus away from the Algarve for months. By the time Christian Bruckner emerged as a prime suspect over a decade later, investigators were left sifting through a crime scene that had long since been tampered with. Any trail had already been erased, covered, or overwritten. There was nothing pure to follow back. And so, even as the new evidence uncovered in 2025 brings a renewed sense of urgency, it can't undo the harsh truth that underpins this case. The investigation once had a chance to uncover the truth, but that chance vanished in the very first hours. In ordinary cases, police follow the evidence, but in cases like Madeleine McCann's, sometimes they follow the spotlight instead. From the very first week after her disappearance, the case ceased to be a legal investigation. It became a national symbol. British tabloids pushed out hourly headlines. Portuguese sensational papers reconstructed the scene with imagination, not facts. And within that media storm, every investigative direction turned into a storyline for the public, not a path toward the truth. The pressure to get quick results, to find someone now, to name someone to blame, overwhelmed Portuguese police, who had never handled a case of this scale. When no clear suspect emerged, they turned toward the parents. Kate and Jerry McCann were declared arguidos, official suspects, without any forensic evidence. The justification? Kate seemed too calm. She didn't cry the right way. Meanwhile, the UK government sent investigators to support the case, but with them came pressure. There had to be progress. There had to be accountability. It created a contradiction. Police were being supervised and pushed, yet given no real power to act across borders. The media didn't wait for results. They created their own momentum. When Bruckner's name surfaced, headlines declared him a child-killing pedophile, the German monster. Public opinion was so tightly steered that if police didn't arrest him, they were called incompetent. But if they did, without DNA evidence, the entire case could collapse in court. A German investigator once admitted bluntly, "The issue isn't whether Christian Bruckner is guilty. The issue is whether we can prove it in front of a public that has already made up its mind." The Madeleine case, then, became the victim of an invisible gravity. Politics demanded closure to pacify the public. Media demanded storylines to feed the ratings, and police were trapped between both, staring at a crime scene long since trampled. So when the new evidence surfaced in 2025, a gun, a scrap of fabric, a deep well, the first response wasn't a legal assessment. It was a press conference, a live stream, a quick interview, a headline. We're still pursuing leads. But the truth doesn't live in a soundbite. It lives in a single question. Are the facts strong enough to stand against the weight of expectation? Or will they, like so much else in this case, be pulled under by a game of appearances, where the silence of justice is the loudest noise of all? 18 years have passed. Millions of euros poured into the investigation. 3 governments took turns handling the files. Hundreds of articles were written. Thousands of hours were spent analyzing, reconstructing, speculating. And all of it revolved around a single name, Madeleine Beth McCann. And after all that time, what remains is not a conclusion, but an absence. We have a suspect, a name, an address, a criminal record, but no indictment. We have physical evidence, a gun, a piece of faded cloth, a deep well, but no DNA, no biological trace, no definitive link. We have 7 theories, 7 paths, 7 explanations, from lone predators to international trafficking networks, from investigative blunders to invisible pressures. Yet no theory is strong enough to close the case, and none is weak enough to be dismissed outright. The Madeleine McCann case is no longer just an open file. It's a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting part of the truth, but none large enough to restore the whole image. It shows us that in a world supposedly governed by law and technology, there are still blind spots untouched by either. That a child can disappear in plain sight, in broad daylight, under the care of responsible adults, and no amount of excavation or evidence review may ever recover what was lost. When a rusted gun was pulled from the bottom of the well in Praia da Luz, someone hoped that truth might surface with it. That after all these years, the case would find its closure, an answer, a name to be held accountable. But it didn't. What came up was memory, and a silence that still holds its shape. To this day, no one knows where Madeleine went that night. There is no proof she died. There is no proof she is alive. And perhaps the most frightening possibility isn't that she left this world, but that she's still here, somewhere no one thinks to look anymore. And everything we've done has already come too late.